Today's recipe calls for white chocolate chips. I'm going to show you how to make blondies. These are the opposite version of brownies. They're really easy to make and they come out super delicious. So with that said, let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is preheat our oven to 350 while we get our blondies ready. Next thing we're going to do in a small saucepan is brown 3/4 cup of unsalted butter. You're going to brown your butter over low to medium heat. You want to keep an eye on it because once it starts to slightly turn brown, it'll go quick. So you want to give it the occasional stir while you watch it. And it helps if you cube your butter. This way it melts a lot faster and it'll start to brown a lot quicker as well. And you can totally skip the browning process and just straight up melt your butter, but browning your butter will bring a ton of flavor to our blondies. The next thing we're going to do is grease a 9x9 baking dish with, of course, some more butter. Greasing your pan like this will help parchment paper stick in our pan. Once you have it greased, you're going to throw in a nice sized piece of parchment paper. Using parchment paper like this will make the process of getting our blondies out of the pan that much easier, and it'll also make the cleanup process a sure jiffy. And the best way to get your parchment paper to fit into your pan is to lay your parchment paper down and invert the pan right on top and cut it where it needs to. This way we get a nice snug fit, and it helps to cut it like this. This way we get nice smooth corners on our blondies. Now that your butter is nice and golden brown and it smells nice and nutty, we're going to throw it in a large mixing bowl, and feel free to scrape your pan. If you see a bunch of little black specks in your pan, you want to get those into your bowl as well. That's just the milk solids that got nice and toasted, and that will also add a ton of flavor to your blondies. And a little pro tip for you is to throw your holding apparatus in the fridge and get it nice and chilled. This way when we go to pour our hot butter into our cold bowl, it'll speed up the process of cooling our brown butter down. In the end, this is what your butter should look like. It should be nice and golden brown, and then in the bottom there should be some nice sediment of your milk solids that got nice and toasted. We're going to cool our butter down for about 5 to 6 minutes, or until the side of the bowl is not so hot to the touch. Now that our butter is not so spicy and hot, we're going to start to add all of our sugars to our large mixing bowl. The first thing you're going to add is 2/3 cup of granulated sugar, a 1/2 cup of packed dark brown sugar, and lastly a 1/2 cup of packed light brown sugar. Once you have all of your sugars added to your holding apparatus, you're going to whisk your face off to bring all of these ingredients together. You don't have to use 2 different brown sugars for this recipe. I wanted to use 2 different ones to get more of a complex flavor, so you can totally get away with using whatever you have on hand and really ensure that all of your sugar is coated with our brown butter. So in the end, your sugars should look like wet sand. The next thing we're going to add to our large mixing bowl is 2 large room temperature eggs. And of course, like always, we're going to crack those in a separate container. This way, if we accidentally get any of the eggshell with our egg, we can easily pick it out in our separate container. Once you have both eggs cracked, go ahead and throw them in your bowl and start to whisk your face off to bring your eggs together with your sugar. And if you don't want to do all this whisking by hand, you can easily use a stand mixer or even a hand mixer to do all this dirty work. But I'm trying to get into the featherweight arm wrestling competition, so yeah, that's why I'm whisking by hand. This is why it was really important to let your butter completely cool down before you added your eggs, because if your butter was still really hot, it would end up cooking the eggs, making scrambled eggs, and scrambled egg blondies doesn't sound really that appetizing to me. In the end, it should be this nice caramel looking smooth batter. Now that you have a nice smooth looking batter, the next thing we're going to add to our bowl is 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract, and a little secret ingredient to add as well is 1 1/2 teaspoon of almond extract. It'll also bring a ton of flavor to our brownies, but you can totally skip that and just go with the vanilla if you choose. Now that we have all of our wet ingredients in our holding apparatus, we're going to start to add all of our dry ingredients to our bowl. The first thing you're going to add is 2 1/2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of sea salt, and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. We're going to sift all of our dry ingredients into our wet ingredients. This way we don't get any large clumps of flour in our batter. Now that we've added our dry ingredients to our wet ingredients, we're going to start to incorporate the 2 together so we can start to form our batter. And I made a big rookie mistake here and kept whisking and I should have really ditched the whisk and grabbed a rubber spatula and folded the dry into the wet. It would have been a whole lot easier, because trying to get the batter out of The whisk was a real pain, but in the end, it all worked out. Whatever method you decide to use to combine the wet with the dry, you really want to ensure that you mix your ingredients really well together. There shouldn't be a trace of flour left in your bowl. In the end, it should be this nice, thick consistency of a light brown batter. Now that you have everything nice and well mixed together, the next thing we're going to add to our bowl is 1 cup of white chocolate chips. We're going to reserve about a 1/4 cup of our chips. This way we can throw it right on the top before we throw it into the oven. Now that you have your white chocolate chips added to your bowl, you're going to start to fold it into your batter until they're nice and well dispersed throughout. And you can throw pretty much whatever you want into your blondies. Maybe some regular chocolate chips, or half and half of regular chocolate chips and white chocolate chips, or you can throw some nuts in like macadamia nuts, or maybe some freeze-dried raspberries, or if you want to get real bougie with it, you can make some caramelized white chocolate chips yourself and throw it in, which would be a hard flex. In the end, your blondie batter should be this nice, thick, light brown looking paste that has some specks of white from your white chocolate chips. It's not like a traditional brownie batter, so if it's nice and thick in the end, don't trip, chocolate chip, you did it right. That's a sick dad joke. Once you have all of your white chips folded into your batter, we're going to transfer it over to our lined baking dish. This is why we greased our pan, so it would hold our parchment paper, because our batter is so thick, it'll help keep the parchment paper in place while we spread our batter throughout our pan. Ensure you scrape all the goods from your bowl. This way we don't leave any of that good stuff behind, and it'll also make it a whole lot easier to clean later on. Now that you have all of your batter added to your pan, we're going to start to level it out. You want to ensure that you have a nice level pan of blondies. This way everything cooks nice and evenly, and ensure that you press your batter into the corners of your pan as well. In the end, the top should be one nice, smooth, even layer of batter. Now that you have everything all smoothed out, we're going to add the reserved white chocolate chips to our pan. Once you have all of your white chocolate chips added to the top of your pan, you're going to lightly press them into the batter. In the end, this is what your pan of blondies should look like. Now we're set to throw it into the oven. You're going to throw your pan on the middle rack in your oven, and next we'll set a timer. Now that you have your pan of diabetes in the oven, you're going to bake them anywhere from 30 to 35 minutes, depending on where you live and how hot your oven runs. I found 30 minutes to be the perfect time for my blondies. It also depends on how fudgy you want the center of your blondies to be. So at 30 minutes, the center of my blondies were still nice and fudgy and a bit chewy, which is super delicious. And on the other hand, 35 minutes, they still come out nice and soft, but the center is not as fudgy. So it all really depends on what you're looking for. It's one of those choose your own adventure kind of books. You can also check to see if your blondies are done by poking it with a toothpick, and if it comes out clean, then you know they're done. Now that our timer has gone off, we're going to pull our blondies out of the oven. We're going to let them hang out on the countertop for about an hour or two, or until they're completely cooled down, which of course is the hardest part. Letting them completely cool down will allow them to set up before we cut them into nice sized pieces. Now that your blondies have completely cooled down, we're going to take them out of our pan and throw them on a cutting board. This is why we use parchment paper, because it was a whole lot easier to get them out, and you can grab the excess or the tails of your parchment paper to pull them out. And you want to use a really sharp knife for this. This way we get a nice clean cut on our brownies. And if you're trying to get a certain amount of pieces out of this batch, you can score your blondies. This way you know where to cut, which will make it a whole lot easier to ensure that you get X amount of pieces that you're looking for. And you're going to cut them one way and do your best to cut them straight. I kind of failed on that. Then you're going to turn it sideways and cut the opposite way to get nice little squares. And just a little pro tip for you, I recommend that you cut them into small pieces, because these blondies are pretty rich, so a small piece will go a long way. Now that your blondies are cut into squares or rectangles or whatever you decided to cut them into, grab your favorite plate and start to plate up your dessert. You can cover the top with some powdered sugar or some homemade caramel, or add a scoop of vanilla ice cream, or eat them straight up. It's all up to you. Whatever you decide, enjoy. Alright, now that our blondies are done, let's give them the old taste-a-roo. We'll check them out real quick. So they came out nice and golden brown. They're a little bit darker in color compared to a regular blondie, because I use dark brown sugar and I also use a brown butter, so it gave it a little bit of a darker color. But they look super good. The center is still nice and like fudgy. So yeah, let's give them a shot. These things came out super delicious. They pack a ton of flavor in them. They're nice and sweet, but then yet they're a little salty, so every bite is a little bit different between the salty and the sweetness, but they're not too sweet, of course. Then that brown butter brings a ton of flavor, a bunch of richness, and that brown butter is just nice and nutty and delicious. Then those little white chocolate chips in there add a little punch of sugar as well. Then you can faintly taste the vanilla, which adds another flavor profile to them. Then the texture on them came out really great as well. The center is still nice and chewy, but the top and the bottom is still nice and crunchy, so you get the best of both worlds. Overall, these things are super delicious. Alright, that's it for today's video. This recipe is insanely easy. There's not a whole lot to it at all. This is a perfect dessert for any novice baker out there, or if you need a last minute dessert for a party. These are perfect, they come together quick, and they bake fairly fast. And you can mix and match and pretty much do whatever you want with this recipe. You can skip browning the butter and do regular melted butter, or you could even add some freeze-dried raspberries or some tart cherries, or add some of your favorite nuts like macadamia nuts, or some walnuts or almonds. There's endless opportunities with this one. And if you've never had a blondie, this is basically the knockoff version of a brownie. Not sure which one is better, so you be the judge on that one after you make these and compare it to a regular brownie. Anyways, I'm just rambling on. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching. And when I was whisking super hard, I think I pulled a muscle in my pinky. It hurts. So now I'm gonna go ice it. So we'll see you on the next one. With the brown butter, just rambling. Flavor. Yeah, they're still good. And I don't know what to say. Don't know what I'm doing. For bring dessert, these things are perfect. Gotta catch my breath. Some dried raspberries, some freeze-dried raspberries. Fuck that up, huh? Today's recipe calls for white chocolate chips. I'm going to show you how to make blondies. No, not the basic white girl from Starbucks, but brownies. Well, a version of brownies. They're blondies, but they're not brownies. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, yeah, there you go.